With the dawn of not just a new century, but a new millennium, people are looking back and taking stock of feminism. Do we need new strategies? Is feminism dead? Has society changed so much that the idea of a feminist movement is obsolete? For us, the only way to answer these questions is to imagine what your lives would have been if the women's movement had not happened and the conditions for women had remained as they were 40 years ago. Mid-1960s, Co-ed Week begins. Women enroll in Dartmouth classes as part of the 12-college exchange. Late 1960s, President Kennedy leads the campaign for coeducation. Student referendum yields 80 to 90% support, and the Board of Trustees approves almost unanimously. Alumni fervently oppose. November 22, 1971. Dartmouth announces its decision to go co-ed. 1972. The first women matriculate. The first matriculated female students at Dartmouth are thought to have gone through an awful, degrading, and discriminatory first few years. There are shocking stories about how women were the targets of sexual harassment, constant heckling, and derision. There are tales of men raiding women in the dining hall with scorecards, students snorting and calling the female students cohogs, and men conducting dorm raids. What we have found, however, from interviews, written statements, pictures, and an examination of documents from the early days of Dartmouth women, is that, while undoubtedly the aforementioned stories are true, those that did not welcome women were a vocal minority on campus, and most women felt privileged and welcomed. From the mouths of some of the first few classes of women at Dartmouth themselves.
Freshman year was a little dicey. When I first arrived here, there was a lot of tension. There were signs on the dorms that said "Cohogs go home," and for the most part, fall term of freshman year was very tough. Being a woman at Dartmouth, it was perhaps 10% of the student population, mostly those affiliated with Greek associations, who really did not want us here. And the more I think about it, it used to seem to me like it was everybody, but it was really a very small percentage of guys who, when I arrived here, my first day here, there were signs on the Gold Coast. I had an experience my freshman year where I was kidnapped by a fraternity and actually put us in a car. They grabbed us. We were studying. Put us in a car, took us to their fraternity basement, and sang songs to us, and thought they were being really cool, and it was kind of frightening. It was not nice. My freshman year was pretty iffy. I, after fall term, wanted to leave and was ready to transfer anywhere. Like, you name it, I would have gone. But I'm glad I stayed, because things really did get in a situation. Mm-hmm. Because that was probably the most difficult and most awkward of anything at Dartmouth for the freshman women. And thank heavens for the ski team, because we would go to dinner together, and I would kind of go with a group. But you couldn't walk into Thayer Dining Hall by yourself. When you walked into Thayer Hall, and everybody ate at Thayer, and it would get packed at around 6 o'clock. And inevitably, I even remember which table. There would be a group of guys with rating cards, and they would hold them up. And when you walked in, it was just really, really. It was mean, is what it was. And that's one reason why, like with the ski team, we would go to dinner at 4:30, before the crowds got there. And I think a lot of women would rather skip going to dinner than to tolerate the jerks that were. There were some women in my class who were rather attractive, and they would get applause. Yeah, so it was embarrassing for them. It was just. I know there were many meals that I just, especially being down in Hidman, there were many meals where I just said, "I'm not going." So that was really hard.
People and other alums always say, "Oh my God, you were in the first class of women? I heard it was so awful." They've got this sort of myth thing of Trojan women dodging bullets on campus, and it really wasn't that bad, as long as you were sort of self-possessed. It really wasn't as bad of an experience if you developed the skin for it. The terrible experience is a myth. Although I was acutely aware that I was in a minority, I never felt that Dartmouth was any less mine. We found that the pervasive attitude amongst the pioneer women was tough. They knew what they were in for. a male-dominated environment where the vocal minority was louder than the open-minded majority. You had to be tough, be rough and tumble, have a thick skin, and play in a man's world. The first women of Dartmouth were not that sensitive. The desensitized attitude worked better. People were incredibly excited. There was really a kind of pioneering spirit among us. I really had a feeling we were all so privileged to be a part of history in the making.
When they were not doing their physics, they would have Playboy magazines and Penthouse magazines, and so this was sort of all sitting around, in our office all the time. There weren't any support. I was generally happy, but it was very difficult. I did feel that I was going through it alone a lot of the day, a while before I could actually go to some of the guys and say, so were you able to get that one Jackson problem last night? I haven't been able to get it yet. He said, oh yeah.
I wasn't excluded from the fraternities. If you could hang in there with them, then you were accepted. You had to walk this strange line between being tough enough to hang with the guys and being feminine. They didn't want you to be too feminine, but not unfeminine. They were tough women and developed thick skin because that was the way to survive. They felt that they came out of Dartmouth stronger and more prepared to deal with male-dominated professions and experiences in life because of or thanks to their Dartmouth experience. The pioneers understood that Dartmouth had existed for hundreds of years without their presence as students. Thus, they were prepared to adapt to Dartmouth rather than expecting Dartmouth to adapt to them.
Faculty was very interested in our opinions and in drawing us out. This was back in the days when men just spoke out in class and women raised their hands. So I think they went out of their way slightly to engage us more in conversation. And the campus from all levels remarkably welcoming. We were all women in that building, but they were men's bathrooms that we used. Not that it made any difference, it was just sort of strange to have the open showers and things like that.
Dartmouth prepared me for a life in fields previously dominated by men. I am more assertive, resilient, and confident because of my years at Dartmouth. I heard more pain from the women who were from the classes of 1980 and 1985, who came in expecting it to be a normal co-ed school. We never expected that. We viewed ourselves as pioneers and expected to have some rough times along the way and expected to be figuring things out as we went. When I got there, I was shocked by the vulgar minority that made it uncomfortable and made it clear they didn't want co-eds on campus. In today's politically correct environment, that type of hostility would never be accepted or condoned. The first women of Dartmouth were hazed into the college in despicable ways. Though today we would use the word despicable to describe their experiences, in the 1970s the women were much more prepared for that kind of disturbance. In the 1970s, male domination was much more socially acceptable than it is today. Thus, the pioneer daughters of Dartmouth came in expecting such resistance to their inclusion in the life of the college. On the contrary, today women come into Dartmouth expecting to be treated equally. Thus, we cringe at the stories we've collected, knowing that on our campus today such incidents would not take place. What's different is that today we expect men to behave differently. Our attitude was that they're animals, and if you chose to go into a frat party, then you get what you expect. If you didn't want to be insulted, you didn't go. You come from a different place.